So good morning, everybody, and good morning to the Internet. Of course, the people on the Internet know Chairman Issa quite well at this point. Someone I read quite a bit, Nancy Scola, I think, called him the Internet's man in Washington not so long ago in Reuters. And we've had some opportunities to talk as well about open government data, open government, the role of Congress in creating more open and accountable, I think, government at many levels. Chairman Issa has been involved in open government conversations, I think, more than almost any other member of Congress. See you on the open data hashtag, chiming in and really opening up his office to the American people. I'm really interested in talking with him afterwards. We'll have an opportunity. Unfortunately, Senator Warner is not going to be able to join us due to a family emergency, so there'll be more opportunity for a robust conversation. And I've already asked for questions online, and they have been coming in. Hopefully we'll get some here as well. If you want to know more about Chairman Issa, of course, you can go to the Internets because you've been extensively covered. So with that, I will give you the podium, and then we can talk some more. Thank you.
Of course, my goal at any event like this is to add at least 1,000 new Twitter followers, so let's see if we can reach that goal. You know, deja vu all over again is a little bit of what I'm here to talk about, but perhaps what 2 years ago when we introduced the Data Act on a bipartisan basis, passed it unanimously, not just out of our committee but out of the House, we did so because we knew that it would provide transparency, that it would provide the framework in which we would begin to really implement the kind of access to data that is certainly available in corporate America but not available in government America. Now, we failed to get the support of the administration, and I would notably say the Vice President has been very supportive and has said so publicly again and again, but we failed to get the kind of support that allowed the Senate to pick it up, so it's died. We're back again with the same Data Act with some minor changes, and there's always an opportunity to improve a bill. But the reason is very different. During the intervening 2 years, we experienced sequestration. So now a bill which on paper scores in the single, 100 million or less cost suddenly is part of sequestration for a different reason. Organizing and structuring data will save countless hundreds of millions of dollars in the short run, and in the long run will save billions of dollars, not including the benefits of access to information, the possibility that in fact, if more people know more in the bidding process, we will get more products for less. The fact that, that by definition, the failures and inaccuracies when databases try to speak to each other would be eliminated. All of the things that we wrote the Data Act for are less important in a sequestration world than the question of knowing that your $81 billion worth of IT is not going to increase, but in fact go down, tells you that what you have to do now with the diminishing dollars, at least the diminishing constant dollars, is to make the investments, the design-build investments, that show you that you can in fact provide more information for less. And the less is now the emphasis. The Data Act is certainly not the only challenge we face. I just left a hearing, I apologize, a few minutes late, and it goes on with one of my subcommittee chairmen running it, on the complete breakdown of the ability of government to capture communications within government under the Federal Records Act. The breakdown is because of the great success. All of us have a Gmail account, and almost all of us have it on our phone. All of us have a Hotmail account, or, and I don't want to offend any carrier, but the list goes on. Some of us may have an AOL account. It could happen. I certainly have friends who have AOL accounts because they founded the company. But the fact is that the chances that your iPad or your iPhone or any other device doesn't have 2 accounts or more is becoming less and less likely. As a result, government is capturing less and less of the communication, and that's a problem. It's a problem for those who FOIA. It's a problem for those like myself who, when things go wrong, would like to follow back to the cause and often cannot do so. Structured data isn't complicated. It's common sense. But common sense, even when implemented, can run into complications, and we'll speak more about it during Q&A. But I want to tell you something. I gave a lot of credit to the Security Exchange Commission when they agreed to go with XBRL, when they, in fact, agreed to structured data, when using their power to insist that public companies report to them in this format was implemented. Now, I'm sending a letter off this week because implementation has proven why the Data Act not only is necessary, but understanding what it must achieve and must do is necessary. Only in government would 10Ks delivered digitally be then put onto paper so they can be manually typed in so they then can be digitized with all the inherent errors of people with paper and pencil converting back what was already digital. Now, it sounds absurd, except it's really happening. The fact is that checking whether corporate America is delivering you data properly is a machine event. It's something that we all know computers can do. They can look for the anomalies, the failures, cross-check, and see if, in fact, somebody at corporate America did a typo, and they can do it in fractions of a second. Today, public companies' reports are flawed, not because they were submitted flawed, but because after they were submitted, they became flawed, and those anomalies are often not checked. Usually they're not material, but they're always the result of delay, and sadly, they add to the cost of a government agency that draws much of its funds from outside of the direct taxpayer, but still taxes corporate America in a way that makes one thing very clear. It lowers our efficiency and effectiveness. Many people wonder if our motives are anti-government employee. I would say, before we take questions, that it's just the opposite. The most important thing is that government employees, you be the most important fiduciaries of the facts and not people who are constantly involved in trying to produce documents. I would hate to be back in my position in the military these many years ago and have to produce something for my boss as best I could from disparate databases, try to tabulate them, line up the cells, and present it, and hope that I didn't screw up, knowing that in its raw form, it should be 3 or 4 keystrokes away from being produced and then manipulatable. Additionally, one of the anomalies that our committee is going to deal with that I think all of you should look at is government printing. What is the business of what once produced volumes of paper? Is it to transition into being the custodian of a producer of digital data? Perhaps. But today, as we speak, the government printing office is trying to make RFID ID cards for the government. And I'm looking and saying, okay, it's sort of a printed document. The whole question about government efficiency is, will we be like Toyota and design our cars to be easy to manufacture and rattle-free? Or will we be like Rolls-Royce was just a few years ago? Countless tens of thousands of hours spent making a beautiful vehicle that then spends a lot of time being picked up, taken on a truck to the dealer, and returned to the very happy owner who will drive it for another few miles before, in fact, it will be picked up on a truck, taken to the dealer, and brought back. We are not in the business of making Rolls-Royces. We do not want moving beauty. We want that functional, efficient, designed to succeed vehicle that, in fact, provides the data to us necessary to meet our obligations of government and then our obligations to the taxpayer for information. And with that, I came here more to take your questions and, quite frankly, to hear your thoughts on what more we should do. And with that, I'm happy to open it up to you. Questions online or not online?
Sure. Well, we have numerous questions coming in online, and if you don't mind, I'll just read them back to you and be the voice for the internet here. First one here is a commissioner from Texas.
Go deeper. Go
Okay.
deeper if you're going to be a voice for the internet.
Yeah,
It's a big place.
The commissioner from Treasury just admitted that they have trouble compelling the agencies to report. How do you think the Data Act will help with that? Is that enough resonance?
That's wonderful.
Okay.
You know, the reason for the Data Act is that the Office of Management and Budget for years has dealt with exactly that. They have this mandate, they have the president's ear, and they have a peer status. And that's the reality is, among the 74 agencies and cabinet positions that are generally used, although you could proliferate that, or even the 24 or so that are officially cabinet positions, they're all peers. And they all fight to see if the chief of staff will let them visit the president from time to time. The fact is that congressional law creates the mandate that changes that. And it's not just the Data Act. It's the fact that, for example, CIOs, in another bill, we demand that if you're going to be the chief information officer or any other title of that sort, that if you're going to be responsible for producing and overseeing new software, new data, that you have budget authority. Those sort of things change the dynamics. If you've got budget authority, you've got power. If you've got a law that you have to enforce, OMB and other organizations within government, including Treasury, suddenly have the tooth to say, look, it's not my asking and it's not my choice. It's the law. Do you want to be hauled before Congressman Cummings' committee? I chair it with him.
Yeah, the shared responsibility. So shortly we're going to hear, hopefully if Mr. Cantor makes it down the road, about open data in the legislative branch. And as you know, you've been quite supportive of opening up
As
the House.
has his leader Cantor.
Yes, I've been foremost proponent, I would say. But the question here, again from the internet, how could open data in the legislative branch help citizens make more informed assessments on how our representatives are doing?
Well, that's a great question, and Leader Cantor has been supportive, but to be honest, OpenGov from outside has found it necessary. You need to have the public able to take our legislation in its pure form, work with it, provide their amendments, and provide their amendments in a transparent way. And here's the most important thing. Everyone in this room has an absolute right to lobby their congressman. Even if you're a government employee, you can never lose that right. But the question of whether or not that lobbying effort becomes transparent is the biggest challenge that we face. And with Leader Cantor's support and the Speaker's support, I think we're very, very close to where if you want to come in and talk to your congressman in private, that's fine. But if you want a line of a bill or some aspect amended or changed, you've got to be part of going online, putting it down, and being transparent as to who you are. That approach, the Madison approach, if you will, is part of what I think you're going to see the House implement, so that if you come in to see me and you suggest a line, I envision that even if you don't put it online, if I make a line change or proposed line change, I recognize where I got it from, and then the entire internet public, if you will, can weigh in with their thoughts and know with a great deal of certainty that it comes from a source. And I think that's the important thing. You cannot any longer have the anonymous change to a bill that has huge ramification, and you say, how did it get in there? And there never seems to be an answer. So I think when Leader Cantor gets here, that's an area that we all support. Years ago, when we were fighting against these parachuted in earmarks, earmarks are gone, but the fact is the administration parachutes things in every day. And part of our role is to make sure that when suddenly a spending occurs or an exemption occurs, that it be trackable back to its source.
Have any other members adopted Madison yet?
We do have a number of members who have adopted it. Of course, Jared Polis, first among them on the Democratic side. But we're seeing a greater adoption. I think the thing about Madison that's interesting is where it served us well in the SOPA-PIPA debate, it needed to prove that it could do a lot in a lot of places. Right now, San Francisco is implementing broadly the Madison project. The state of Maryland has implemented it, and in fact, the city of Baltimore. So the regional rollout of major test cases are showing that it can be flexible enough that it can work for a city council, it can work for a state legislature, and oddly enough, in the case of San Francisco, they had already budgeted money to try to do it. So it ends up that the OpenGov Foundation is being paid by San Francisco to do what they were going to do because they proved they could already do it well. As we come back to Congress, we want to go beyond Congress. Of course, we want Congress's laws to be there, but we want to get to where agencies are as open and transparent in the Madison Project type way, because the EPA process and other major EPA being in this building, agencies have a strong tendency to say we have all this public requirement, but then it's manually posted, and it becomes part of a manual log that's very confusing to figure out.
So when I first came to Washington and covered one of your hearings on open government,
I came during the Coolidge administration myself.
You've been around the block here. You were, let's say, critical of the administration's open data efforts in data.gov. As you look back now, 5 years, what's the thing that they've done the best in these efforts, and what's the thing you'd like to see them improve upon the most?
Well, first of all, I'd like to note that the whole recovery .gov has been a great success. I'm taking no positive shots at how they spent their money, how they chose to do it, because I don't think it created jobs. But it accounted for funding in a more transparent way than ever before, and it did so on a small budget. So I think the important thing for everyone to understand is everybody can do something great. We used to say in my company, in the electronics industry, no bucks, Buck Rogers. No bucks, no Buck Rogers. Plenty of bucks, plenty of Buck Rogers. The trick is, in fact, to get Buck Rogers on a budget. I certainly think that posting websites and trying to get the data right, that's old school. Using structured data so it posts itself, particularly with recipient reporting, and doing it for single-digit millions, that's the magic that I think all of us should be proud of and try to replicate.
So would it be fair to say that you support the aspect of the digital government strategy that pushes forward APIs?
Not only I do, but in our committee in the latest reform that we're putting out, also is trying to create an incentive for open source to be used at a peer level with, if you will, historic, well, sometimes open source starting, but no longer open source, because we think that for the app world, that's particularly incentivizing, because you can be richer and richer the more open your actual data source is. So yes, I do. And as a matter of fact, that's one of the great tragedies, is that when you want to do things within government, it is the exception, for example, in aviation, now that we can look at online, weather we can look online. Those are the exceptions where the data has been sufficiently opened to where you can meaningfully produce an app that the public can embrace and say, wow, what a great invention, when in fact the app is the easy part once the data is open.
Now, one of the successes that the administration cites in data release is around the cost of procedures or hospital pricing across the country. There's now a matter before HHS around CMS, it's the Center for Medicaid, Medicare Services, around more release of Medicare payments to providers. Is that kind of transparency in government spending something that you think would be specifically enabled by the Data Act, and do you support it in terms of having more transparency into what government is paying for healthcare?
The answer is absolutely, but I want to put a couple of quick caveats. As the Data Act calls for structured data, it means that the ability to, if you will, redact in an automated format so that entity X and entity Y, if the actual entity name is not essential, can easily be there, so you can drill down to individual payments without drilling down to proprietary information. And I think that's one of the real benefits of structured data, is that you're no longer doing what I call manual redacting, which sometimes is line by line laborious, or in the case of discovery from the administration, sometimes just a black page because they don't want to tell me anything. And that is not supposed to be funny. It happens every day. In an automated system with structured data, you can take out just the Social Security numbers or federal ID numbers without taking out any other information. So yes, the answer is there. But let me be the devil's advocate. Except for a whistleblower, the state of New York would still be receiving billions of dollars a year of excess payments from under CMS, but when CMS simply ignored the law and was providing payments greater than allowed by law to New York entities that led to $15 billion that New York currently owes the federal government in excess recipient repayment, just on the relatively small portion of Medicaid, which is the nursing home for one category. So the real benefit for this kind of reporting is not to find out that your company has received $1 million. It's to find out that CMS or any other entity is somehow simply paying more than they should, or paying incorrectly, or paying inconsistently. To be able to do an analysis of similar patients material redacted, in different areas. Is one patient getting 2 pins and another person's getting a whole hip replacement? Those things can be meaningful to analyzing excess cost, excess pain, excess trauma, all of which is part of our healthcare system. The fact is we're over-medicated and we're over-operated on, and we're paying too much as a result. But let's go back to the other part. If we can do an analysis, we can find out if less procedures have just as good a result, and if less procedures have just as good a result, that data is the most important data coming out on healthcare, is how do we optimize health while not having people go through, whether it's a CAT scan that simply scares you or a procedure that you take weeks or months recovering from.
Thank you very much, Congressman. So we have questions coming in. This one comes from Chris Taggart, who works for Open Corporates, which creates one of the biggest databases of businesses in the world. And he asks, the current Data Act does not require non-proprietary IDs be used. Why not, and don't such IDs hobble open data's potential?
It's a great question. And the answer, quite frankly, is that we would like to make sure that there, to the greatest extent, is conforming information. We are concerned that the use of that can lead to large amounts of dollars that aren't accounted for. And in the case of the SEC, this is an area we're working with where you can have these non-standard declarations be more material in the amount of dollars that they're referring to than not. And as a result, and I don't know if, I don't believe I have any financial analyst or hedge funds here, but hedge fund people often make their money on an appearance here, digging into an anomaly in one part of it, usually an exception to the generic reporting, sort of the other information. And all of us who are junkies for CNBC, you know, hear that often where Joe's saying, yeah, it looks this way, but I'm looking down at this detail over here. And of course, all the trades at the release have already occurred that matter at that point. So yes, we would like to push for more. I think one of the challenges is if the in-between is that you register these, then in fact they can become, like anything in XBRL, an expanded recognition. The big challenge is if you're doing something, and this is where Data Act does envision, if you're doing something that already is covered in a cell and you're simply individualizing to get out of that reporting, then we think that all the agencies that have obligation to force you into essentially your compliant reporting, and they have the authority to do so. Are anyone here going to ask a question?
All right.
There we go. It's not that I don't like the internet.
That's good, because they're definitely listening. You right there, sir. Yep, thanks.
When is Congress going to open up the congressional research reports?
So that's, when is the Congress going to open up congressional research reports, CRS reports?
You know, that's a great question. And Mr. Cantor will be here shortly. Now, to be honest, you know, from my view, CRS reporting, quickly most of it becomes public, but I'll take that back to, because if what you're saying is that you want to see it machine searchable, whether or not the information is released by committees. Is that right?
Yeah, we want access to the whole database. And
I will take that one back because I don't see a reason we wouldn't. I always try to remind people that I'm not the head of the House Administration Committee. And I say so because my committee primarily looks to the executive branch, but we do lobby heavily to get our house in order in the House. So I will take that back and work on it myself. And if you'll give one of my staff, would staff raise your hand, just give them one of your cards and we'll get you an individual response. Yes, sir. And give us that deep voice so everyone can hear.
Absolutely. What kind of limitations do you think the Paperwork Reduction Act puts on open data in the federal government, and where do you think we could be if we were amended or repealed?
That's a great question. The Paperless Reduction Act was intended, quite frankly, to push us toward where the Data Act is trying to push us. An amendment, to a certain extent, endangers the government printing office and others because, quite frankly, we need to get to be as paperless as possible. And if somebody wants paper, they can take data and turn it into paper in their own living room.
I'm sorry, I'm talking about the fact that prohibits the federal government from asking the public a question without putting the question to the public to make sure it's okay to ask for 6 months. So limitations on data collection, really.
Well, the truth is, and I'll repeat the question or reform it, currently we break that rule. I mean, look, the White House is constantly going out and polling questions and putting it up in real time. Madison, although it wasn't the government in-house, but envisioned to be on their behalf, clearly was asking the question and posting them immediately. So do we need to reform it to say that's simply not the case, that if it's a digital question and a digital answer, it can be in real time? And I think the answer is yeah. We should codify what is already being done and recognize that, that the idea of the old days that you kind of let the newspapers publish it for a long time, rather than if it's on Huffington Post the next day, it should be good for the decision process. And I think that's what you're leading to, is we've actually half broken it already.
Another one from the audience? How about back there?
Hi, thank you so much for being here, Congress. Really appreciate it. As you obviously know, many times in authorization and appropriations reports, staff members will request reports from agencies for the purpose of oversight or getting more information. Do you envision that members of staff will begin requesting more raw data rather than only a word-by-word report?
Well, this is a great question. Our committee has dealt with the excess amount of reports that are requested. They seem like a good idea at the time. They either don't get complied with, meaning the reporting doesn't occur and there's not much enforcement, or they fall on deaf ears. They show up and the person who wanted it on the committee is gone, and they just keep coming year after year after year. And that's an opinion, but I think it's an opinion well supported in the fact. So the Data Act, in our opinion, will eliminate, in many, many cases, the request for a report. The answer is, if the information's online and available, we in Congress, as long as it is available, should in fact have access to that data and not ask someone to report it. If it's not made available in our searches and hopefully the public searches, then the reports will still occur, but in most cases what we'd like it to become is a compliance of the report be created, a link be created, and the committee and the Congress have access to that link, so that effectively it's always there when you want it, and it isn't simply a pack of paper being delivered and people forgetting what it was for. Now, I'm saying that a little tongue-in-cheek because some of these reports are critical. Some of them, even under the Data Act, will require analysis by the agency, and if it requires not just the compiling but an analysis, those will continue, but they won't be as mixed in the clutter, which is where I think the real benefit of the Data Act is more information being directly available and searchable, and then those where you want analysis and commitment by the agency, such as what is your progress on some law. Obviously, it's more than just numbers on a page.
I'm going to take one. Come back here.
Absolutely.
Moderator's privilege. I know you're used to running hearings, but I want to step in. So question from Carl Malamud, who you also know. Why in the world don't we have a full archive of video from congressional hearings? Video is a form of data.
Actually, we do.
Okay.
Our committee's video going back as many years, and I think, I'm trying to think, I think it was 5 years back before my tenure. We have all of it online, and we're in the process of implementing it government-wide. As a matter of fact, Leader Cantor has been supportive of making that happen. That is one of the areas that we're halfway through. The question that is being asked that's half answered is, when will we have it to where you'll be able to, in real time, be able to search and say, I want to see what Darrell said 5, 6, 8, 12 years back, and go through the archive and pick up my video clips of a frame of time that includes me or includes Secretary Geithner or some other individual. The technology obviously exists. The metadata that needs to be attached to video so that it becomes online machine searchable so that you can get the meaningful data you want quickly, which is searching by the subject, searching by perhaps even keywords that line up with the transcript, and most importantly, when you want to find out what Secretary Clinton said at all of her hearings, you should be able to go to the database of House and Senate and get it all. Technology exists. Unlike some of the proposals we're talking about, that one has some incremental cost because it doesn't create efficiencies, but it does create tremendous opportunity, and we are working toward that.
Let 1,000 daily shows bloom. The last time we talked about this area, you said that one of the most important areas the Freedom of Information Act could be extended in the 21st century would be to make it apply to the private sector. And if more government processes or services are moved there, then it makes sense that people might want that. Obviously, that has some controversy, but the question is...
Because remember, that's to the private sector when using taxpayers' dollars.
Right. So do you still support that idea? Is there any action that we could expect ever in Congress in that? And more broadly, what is Congress's role in giving people access to open data about themselves? Because, of course, open data is not just government data.
Well, I'll take the first part as my main answer and then punt a little bit on the second part. At post-NSA right now, we're all a little sensitive on that second question. But I think the first part of the question is extremely important. The whole concept in the Data Act is recipient reporting. If you're a recipient of federal dollars, your private activity stops where government dollars start. So a big part of what's going to happen, the roll-up that the Data Act is going to envision and do and implement, and do it in a way that doesn't cost the recipient or the government more money to collect the data. Just the opposite. It becomes more reliable data that, in fact, prevents redundancy in reporting and compliance. But it does mean that wealthier data, and I'll give you the best example. Today, how many here are from a small, and if anyone, from small or women-owned businesses, minority-owned? Okay. Are you a prime contractor on a government contract?
Yes.
Then I'm picking your data up. It's paper, but I can get the numbers of that. So an agency can be held accountable for whether or not they met that requirement. Now, the two things I can't do as a result, I can't find out if you're a sub or a subcontractor 1, 2, 3 levels down. I can't find out how many dollars you got, which means that there's no benefit for a prime, a sub, or a sub of them to actually look and say, am I giving opportunity to small and minority-owned businesses? The strange thing about it is, where are the opportunities to reach out to startups, to disadvantaged areas and so on? Those opportunities are in the smaller dollars. The fact is, a fraction of $1 billion contract is much more appropriate for a small business than the $1 billion contract. That's one of the benefits of the Data Act, is that recipient reporting, we envision it bubbling all the way up so that you have that wealth of information, which means the government can change its emphasis from how many small and minority-owned contracts are going to directly from the government, which means we're always trying to break up the $50 billion contract into a smaller amount. Instead, we can say within the $50 billion contract, let's look at how much you achieved and whether it should be increased, and what you can ask your primes and their subs to do to reach out. Secondly, and for those who got to watch a certain gentleman who attended the prep school, who claimed to be a wounded warrior because he twisted his ankle apparently playing football in his 1 year of non-military service, and then got a $500 million contract from the IRS to oversee the IBM doing work in which he had no part and didn't even do the invoicing or data collection, but skimmed money off the top. The Data Act envisions that we would have some level of transparency to find out where do the dollars flow. Is it really to a minority, veteran-owned, disabled veteran-owned, et cetera, these outreach areas that are rightful, and Congress has repeatedly reiterated and expanded these programs, but we have no ability to figure out that $500 million program, even if he was a legitimate disabled veteran, it was really the $3 or $4 million he skimmed off for doing nothing. That kind of data is extremely meaningful, and particularly to the organizations trying to expand opportunity for minority-owned businesses. Are we really achieving it, or are we just creating false numbers and somebody's getting a financial benefit from it? So, yes, ma'am. You get the next question as a result.
Great. That was a great segue. So as an entrepreneur of 3 separate businesses over the last decade that have been involved.
So you're a repeat offender.
I'm a repeat offender 3 times, 3rd time lucky. Working with GPO, Library of Congress, and now EPA. The mechanisms for small companies like ours who have been successful in getting contracts still face the bureaucracy of the way contracts were run inside of organizations when, and as if they're dealing with federal systems integrators who have won a $60 million contract for 2 or 3 years. That really needs to change because it really hampers innovation. I've been working on a project for nearly 3 years, specifically around publication of really valuable authoritative data on the environment, and we're hamstrung with bureaucratic processes around system security plans. That's one thing. And another thing is celebrating some of the successes. GPO, for example, is to me a total rock star in terms of use of open source. They've been using it since 1998. We've run a production website that serves 35 million hits per month for GPO, but that includes the Federal Register.
It's an all Linux site.
Pardon me? Yes. And librarians who are oftentimes the people who have historically.
I'm trying to give credit where credit's due on open source.
Thank you. It's Linux and Perl, as a matter of fact, persistent URLs. So if we can give credit and bring to the fore some of these quiet people, many of whom are librarians at Library of Congress and GPO, who are responsible for essential services to government in making this information transparent, I think that would do an awful lot to make agency heads feel the water's safe. We can go in. People have been doing this not only for 3 years, but for 10 or 15 years. So whatever you can do from your position to be able to, like Todd Park likes to say, I'll make you a rock star if you can demonstrate something really cool. You really understand the issues. If you could make rock stars of some of these civil servants, I think that would go a long way to promoting open government transparency.
Thank you, and the promise I'll make you is that the next hearing we do on transparency, we won't just include the failures, we will include some of the successes. And you're right, Library of Congress is good to work with specifically on their goal. We don't always agree with them on copyright, but boy, on these other issues, they're very good.
Okay, we've got time for one more question, then the answer needs to be short because I think we actually have a House Majority Leader coming. Right back there, sir.
Chairman, in 2005, Congress passed Senate Bill 2590.
Say that again?
In 2005, right, Senate Bill 2590 was passed and created some of the, in fact, that's one of the reasons we're here. As a matter of fact. The implementation of the bill after it was passed, the electoral ordinance, only came up with FPS. And U.S. then you back up. I think most people in this room would
Did you get to the question, sir? We're a little bit tight, as I mentioned.
The question is, how are you going to implement data Act if it does in fact get passed in a way that doesn't mirror the way 2590 was implemented?
Okay, and as the majority leader comes up, I'll be brief. The fact is, the Data Act is a tool to an end. By insisting on structured data, we inherently provide the ability to create websites that work, and if they don't work, the data is transparent and easy to see that it doesn't. And I think it really mirrors the recovery.gov efforts, where you had a website that started off with congressional districts that didn't exist and all kinds of other problems. It really had its initial problems, but boy, that recipient reporting was very easy because the public almost immediately could see the errors. The press had a heyday with it, and the site got better on a daily basis. So that's the difference between recipient reporting in an open environment where the websites themselves are fairly easy to see where there's data problems versus a sterile sort of a posting of numbers that people drop down, and then if they're wrong, they say, well, you know, it was a transcribing error. We're using source data. It's something, big data is something that my big boss knows very well, so I'm going to get off the stage and thank you all and welcome Mr. Cantor.